South China Morning Post, 18th of October 2023, Israel-Gaza conflict, China's diplomacy demonstrates the decline of its power in the Middle East. To create a second front and divert U.S. forces from its invasion of Taiwan, China has been sponsoring Hamas. For over a week, Israel has been fighting Hamas in Palestine, and both sides have suffered heavy losses. Except for a few requests for moderation, Western countries, including the US and UK, have generally backed Israel despite Israel's deliberate bombing of targets throughout Gaza. It's interesting to note that China has not adopted the same position as the US and has even condemned Israel's aggressiveness, claiming that Israel's response to the Hamas attack was excessive. Therefore, it is helpful to look at China's intentions on this matter and how it has taken advantage of the chance to strengthen its position in the Middle East. Over the past few decades, China's involvement in the Israel-Palestine conflict has changed. It armed Palestinian Liberation Organization units in the 1960s as part of its first strong support for the cause. After Mao Zedong passed away in the late 1970s, it adopted a less dogmatic posture and modified its viewpoint. As a result, it strengthened ties with Israel by purchasing armaments. In the 1980s, both countries armed Afghan Mujahideen factions to fight the Soviet Union. The primary goal of this was to stop the Soviet Union from entering Afghanistan, which China views as its backyard. China and Israel established formal diplomatic ties in 1992 and gradually increased trade. China is now Israel's second-largest trading partner due to these evolving connections. In light of this, it would seem sensible to conclude that China should back Israel in the ongoing battle. This hasn't been the case, though. China has called for an end to violence but has not followed the Israeli position in denouncing Hamas despite condemning attacks on civilians. Furthermore, Chinese media outlets have criticized Israel and placed the blame for escalating tensions in the Middle East on the U.S. Israeli officials chastised these early remarks, expressing their dissatisfaction with China's position and Chinese strategy that sacrifices Israeli blood. China's action is not surprising, though, considering that, in contrast to the US and Israel, it has declined to designate Hamas as a terrorist organization. Furthermore, it has frequently advocated for a two-state solution, a stance that the Israeli government opposes. China does not back Palestine out of ideological concern for Muslims or minority groups, given that it has been accused of treating its own Muslim Uyghur population brutally. China's aspirations in the Middle East and worldwide are vital to understanding its responses. The Middle East has proven to be one of the most crucial regions for China to interact with as it attempts to increase its influence worldwide. China's vast Belt and Road Initiative depends on the Gulf countries for gas and oil as well as for connectivity. China is aware that due to U.S. military activities and overall withdrawal from the region, the U.S.'s influence in the Middle East has gradually decreased. By endorsing the Palestinian cause, which is dear to many Arabs in the area and Muslims worldwide, it has attempted to destabilize the U.S. China seeks to strengthen its soft power in the region and forge relationships with Arab countries that are impatient with the U.S.'s sluggish exit from the area by declining to support Israel. Additionally, China has been in contact with several countries, including Egypt, with whom it offered to cooperate in achieving a ceasefire between Israeli forces and Hamas militants in Palestine. China appears to have successfully mediated the resumption of diplomatic relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Still, its involvement was limited to the last stages of months-long negotiations. This is the background to these diplomatic overtures. The U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, most recently urged Foreign Minister Wang Yi to use China's funding and influence over Hamas to stop Iran from arming its allies, including Hezbollah in Lebanon, and opening a second front in the conflict with Israel. The strategic disadvantage that an attack by Hezbollah on Israel would bring about is why the U.S. is trying to stop it. To To this extent, U.S. officials have warned Iran and Hezbollah of severe repercussions should they intervene on Israel's behalf. The U.S. has also looked to China in this matter, given China's improving ties with Iran in recent years. Therefore, calls for China to utilize its influence and stop further escalation are a clear indication of its growing presence in the Middle East, despite its undermining of the U.S. and Israel. It's unclear where these political maneuvers will end up in the long run. But for the time being, China is staying out of the way and just gradually increasing its influence in the area while encouraging Hamas to carry out additional strikes. It's possible that China's support for Palestine could help it gain some traction among Arab countries, particularly those that are dealing with militant domestic support for the Palestinian cause. Of course, China has no illusions that it can make any significant gains from this conflict aside from using it to die down more American troops.